For joining me. This is my debut promo for it's my pilot for As California Goes. Coming soon, my new podcast, As California Goes. I'll have cutting edge events, interviews, and live coverage on what you need to know for the sake of our nation, faith, and family. That's the nutshell. Meanwhile, follow this link that I have here for all of my latest topics and soon previous sites archives from as far back as 3 years ago. I've had a couple of other podcast sites and I disabled those, and I have a new one with two shows now. The upcoming As California Goes, and another one already with quite a few podcast ideas, topics, is called Learning to Think. So Proverbs chapter 29 verses 2 is my show's focus, from Proverbs chapter 29 verses 2, and Proverbs chapter 11 verse 6. It reads, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked bears rule, the people mourn. It is my prayer that one way to see California and the nation increase in righteousness is to see what various other biblical instances record. One such account is Proverbs chapter 11, verse 6. The righteousness of the upright shall deliver them, but transgressors shall be taken in their own naughtiness. In other words, they will be entrapped in their own devices. And I'll even share with you my favorite account in the Bible, many of which it records the evil or the wicked being trapped in their own devices. Just imagine somebody setting out a bear trap in the woods, and then a few days later stepping in that same bear trap that he left for a bear. That's exactly what being trapped in your own devices means. And I'll share with you my favorite account, and I'll even give you some modern recent examples on just how that is happening. I actually began that prayer about 2 years ago. God, let the wicked be trapped in their own devices, and it's been happening over and over again, many of which I actually recorded just for the record. But I'll share some of that with you, as well as having cutting edge information and guests on the show. So what about California? Here's a quote from a financial expert, in which I actually podcasted about. I'll have that in my archives. Did I say I'll have my archives? I'll also have the archives from as far back as 3 years ago. I recorded this guy. He's a financial expert. And I also have a quote from an attorney, and they both say the very near similar things. But here's a quote from a financial expert heard internationally via radio and social media, Carrie Lutz, from early 2017. It's no secret that the state of California has been in a downward spiral for many years, from crumbling dams and infrastructure to tax-crazed ideologues driving the producers from the state. There's no hope, which is why, as was said during the Vietnam War, quote, we had to kill the village to save it, end quote. California is exactly the same position. Carrie says it must be killed to save it. Its pension plan is drastically underfunded. Its governor has long since detached from reality, and no one is facing up to its long short-term problems. A major fiscal disaster is all that can save the once golden state. And the governor that Carrie Lutz is referring to, of course, is former Governor Jerry Brown. Now we have Gavin Newsom, which guess who he is? Nancy Pelosi's nephew. And an interesting thing about Nancy Pelosi, you should see her district tucked in a little corner of the Bay Area in San Francisco. It's the size of a neighborhood. Imagine that. The most powerful woman in Washington, her district is the size of a neighborhood. So, and this from June 14th of 2018 from Fox Insider News. A California attorney sounded off Thursday on the state's misguided liberal leadership in response to a radical plan to split the state into 3 smaller states. You remember that? The proposal to divide the Golden State into Northern California, Southern California, and California qualified to be placed on the November ballot. Well, that didn't see the light of day after people voted on it. Reacting on Fox and Friends, Kurt Schlichter, who is also a columnist for townhall.com, proposed Los Angeles be its own state under the new plan. We can build a giant wall around it on the border and seal it off from the rest of the United States so it can stop doing so much damage, he said. When asked how he thought splitting California into 3 states would impact liberal presence in Congress, Schlichter said, let's divide a great patriotic state like Texas into 4 that we can get a bunch new conservative senators, end quote. So that is actually a lot of the thinking behind dividing up the state of California. So somehow save it with so-called conservative senators and congressmen and women. And that's kind of like the underlying problem. We think that the politicians are supposed to do everything, and we just do nothing but elect them. And we'll be discussing things on that line also. But we all know that that's fantasy. You can't just think that one man or one woman, whoever the president may be, or whoever your congressman or your state legislator, they can't fix everything themselves. It's we the people. So the issue that California faces is that the majority of the state's influence is derived from a few pockets, namely Silicon Valley and Los Angeles, he said. It's almost like a feudal government here. You got the overlords living in Silicon Valley and Los Angeles, and they're ruling over this vast, vast nation, said Schlichter. The people out in the valley and the mountains, they're not getting represented. They're getting overrun. They're getting treated like garbage. They're being ignored, and this state is being run by the sort of people who live in Silicon Valley and who live in West Side Los Angeles, and that's just not right, he added. California is like a drunk, he says. It has to hit rock bottom and get some sense of, again, and re-embrace free enterprise instead of this liberal Venezuela nightmare, Schlichter said. And this is from June of 2018, a year ago. And now look what's going on in Venezuela. New developments. President Trump is recognizing an interim president for Venezuela instead of their valid president. And so go ahead and stay tuned for my show, and you won't regret it on my Spreaker podcast. The links are here. Go to my Spreaker podcast and check out some of the previous shows, and you won't be sorry. So God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And when I come with my first show, don't worry, I'll have my intro, my outro, a few sound effects and things like that, and it'll be a blast. And feel free, all of my podcasts are downloadable so you can listen to at your own leisure. So God bless you. Thank you for watching and listening. Have a wonderful day. This is going on YouTube, my Spreaker podcast, Twitter, and Facebook, and there's a whole mess of other venues that I could be going on also, and I gotta check with a friend of mine to get those links, or maybe I can find them without having to ask them all over again. But there's so many links out there, and this is a very trusted friend, and I'll have him on the show also. But he's already doing his podcast, and he has all these links that may seem obscure, but the more people listening and watching, the more your word gets out, right? Jesus even said, go to the highways and the byways. Go to your Jerusalem first, and then Samaria and the uttermost parts of the earth. And go to the whole world and preach the gospel to all creatures. So this is what we're doing here on the internet. It's free and it goes everywhere. And it is out there pretty much forever until you delete it from your show. And then after a few years, it'll disappear to make room for new material on the internet. But everything on the internet, it doesn't last forever. And what does last, even if you delete things, it's metadata. And there's no tons of metadata, but no reason to get into that metadata unless somebody is under some kind of investigation. They get the metadata, put it together like a puzzle with the algorithms, the artificial intelligence, and all that stuff. But what a great time that we're in right now. We could preach the gospel to the whole earth like that. So God bless you guys. Tune in for As California Goes and check out my podcast, my Spreaker podcast. God bless you and have a wonderful day.